Joseph, we've spent a lot of time talking about Argentina's sovereign bonds. We've spent less time talking about Argentina's publicly traded companies. Let's fix that.
Yeah, there is a reason why we haven't spoken about them very much, and it's because they are like tiny. They're like Lilliput as a stock market. If you look at like the biggest 10 Argentine companies by enterprise value, you have YPF, which is sort of like $22 billion. That's massive, we know. It's an energy company. Then you go from YPF, it's a long way down to like Telecom Argentina, which is like, $4.5 billion. Still pretty big. But then by the time you get to like 10 or 13, they're like $1 billion.
Right.
Right. So it's like you get very small very quickly.
Now, how has that happened? I guess. Well, what's the cause of that?
Well, it's like when we've been talking about the Argentine sovereign, it's because it can't access international debt markets because it has this holdout issue, because they can effectively embargo its payments on its restructured bonds, and so it just can't borrow fresh money, essentially.
So the Argentinian companies, do they have to finance with equity?
They have to follow in its wake, and if you look at costs of equity for YPF, it's like 12.5%. If you look at Telecom Argentina, it's 14%, and there is no debt on Telecom Argentina's balance sheet.
So clearly they could bring their total cost of funding down if they had access to the debt market.
Yeah.
Now, you and I are clever guys, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to play the Argentinian sovereign situation by buying these companies, and when they settle the sovereign situation, cost of funding at these companies will go down, the doors will open, capital flow in, and we're going to make a fortune. How's that going to work?
I agree. It's a simple mechanism, and it should work. It really should work. Except we'll be investing in Argentina and the government, which is pretty wacky in its response to this idea of settling of the holdouts. It doesn't want to do it. This week it said, and we also have to remember it's in default on the restructured bonds which are paid in New York at the moment because of this issue. And so it basically said, we'll pay you locally instead, using bank accounts, etc., in Buenos Aires. Which maybe if you are holding the defaulted sovereign paper makes sense because you have some prospect of payment if you believe it can work. Many don't, of course. But if you are holding an Argentine equity, it's ominous because if it does work, Argentina is not going to go tapping debt abroad again for a very long time. That means it won't be blazing a trail for the companies, and again you're back in this Lilliput market.
So the Lex view is that the Argentine equity market is isolated and unfortunately likely to stay that way.
Yeah, I mean it shouldn't be because these are companies which should be financing at much lower cost. But for now, the action is just in the Argentine sovereign paper. That will lead the way.
Thanks.